Welcome to the Fish North Georgia podcast, where we talk everything fishing here in North Georgia.
Make a cast over that brush pile and bring wolf packs of spotted bass up.
Georgia is blessed with so many of these electric-only lakes.
No, I didn't say that, Danny. Don't be
so,
speculating now.
All right, guys, we are back on this episode of the Fish North Georgia minicast. I'm with UGA angler Nathan Ragsdale, and the question today, or the topic, is CoAnglers. All right, we got a lot of these guys that want to get into Bassmaster Opens, the Costa Series, the BFLs. They don't have a boat. They want to fish it, so they have to, of course, do it as a co-angler. Mm-hmm. And this all the way down to our local tournaments. Every two-man tournament, somebody's in the front, somebody's in the back. So I guess the topic that we want to discuss is, maybe what are some of the, etiquette rules, even if they're unwritten, of a co-angler? What are things that co-anglers can do to maximize their chances, and just maybe some all-around tips that can help somebody who's looking to do this be more successful at doing it?
Well, I think what you just said, somebody that's looking to be successful, you got to start somewhere. Okay?
Right, absolutely,
so
yeah.
I think most people start in the back of the boat. So I started, jumping into BFLs. At the time when I was in high school, I was fortunate enough to have in contact with a pro who is from Ackworth, Glenn Chapelier, and he kind of took me under my wing, and I was able to travel with him during the summers, after school was done, on the FLW tour co-angling. So
right.
You talk about the learning curve throughout my career, that was huge.
I bet.
And I think the biggest thing for a co-angler to keep in mind is you're there to learn. Yes, in a BFL you might have a couple grand on the line. Costa Series, I think you got a boat. As you progress, you got more on the line. But if I'm a co-angler, I'm there to learn. That's why I want to do it. Okay. I wish I could go back. I can go back. I wish I would take just go co-angle a BFL or co-angle a Costa Series or Bassmaster Opens on a lake that I have never been on. I almost went and hopped in the one they just had in Florida, because I've never fished Florida.
Right.
Coming up in my career, I know at some point I'm going to have to.
Yeah.
And so that's just a way to save money, go out there and learn, and not feel too bad about getting your butt hurt.
Well, that's true. And you can kind of watch, you're watching what the angler's doing, and especially if you get the luck of the draw and you get a top angler.
Yes.
So, yeah, that makes perfect sense. I've never really thought about doing it just to learn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's the biggest thing. I mean, go out there and learn, just relax, have fun. Most of the boaters, I mean, you'll get some that are, not too nice, but most of the guys are real happy to share. Treat them like they're a king, they'll treat you good.
Right. I was going to ask that at some point during this. What if you just get a jerk angler? Just the boater is just absolutely. Have you had one of those?
Yes.
And you don't have to say the names.
I have.
You have. Okay. So how did you deal with that? Because that can make for a long day.
It did. So first FLW tour event I ever co-angled, and this was a professional. Okay. And they might be the worst because they've got they got a house payment on the line, right?
Right.
So is what it is. But I was on the Potomac River. Like I said, I was like 15 years old,
Right.
just out of my mind, like starstruck up
Yeah.
there. All this Brian Thrift,
Yeah.
Scott.
Right.
Well, I pull this guy, and we're out there. We take off, whatever. I'm hyped up. We're fishing in this giant milfoil bay, like it's acres, okay? And there's boats all around us. And he was throwing a mojo rig, which is just like a little split shot rig almost, with a fluke. And it's like a mini Carolina rig, right? You got to have some line on the tip of your rod to throw that thing out. So speaking of non-spoken etiquette and whatnot, basically, like the two seats in the bass boat, you get the 180 degrees back from there, okay? You're not supposed to really cast past that line.
Okay.
In fact, my co-angler for the BFL, I got third in on Lanier last week. He was awesome. That guy was awesome. But he had told me his boater in like the BFL before that literally had red tape on his boat to where like co-anglers, you don't go past this line, you don't cast past this. Just
Seriously.
yeah. And I was like, that's crazy.
Yeah.
But anyways, back to the Potomac River. So I was flipping a little rodent. I was flipping a 3/8 ounce, just pedaling along because I couldn't cast up there.
Right.
And he's just bombing this thing, fishing ditches within the flat. Well, I popped 2 4s from behind him, so he's already kind of pissed off. He had like 3 dinks at the time. Well, so my leg is like up against his driver's seat, okay? And so if you can imagine, I made a pitch out to the right side, so my braid's got a little loop in it, out. Well, dude, he steps back right in front of his console to just launch this thing. And like I said, it's a mojo rig. He probably had that much line between his weight and his fluke, and then extra to cast.
Yeah.
That fluke wrapped around my braid, dude, and he bird's nest the absolute hell out of his reel. And he turned around, threw that thing on the ground, just laid into me. I'm talking about in my face, laid into me.
And you're still a 15-year-old kid, right? At this time?
Yeah.
Okay.
There's boats around us.
Right.
Everybody's like, what's going on?
You're right.
And it scared the hell out of me, dude.
I bet.
I thought he was going to hit me.
Yeah, I bet.
And, so, you do get some boaters, but it's just part of it, man.
Yeah.
It's luck of the draw.
I got you. And that was probably your worst experience?
Yeah, I'd say so.
You can tell me who it is off camera like that. So, one of the things that people talk about when they're going in as a co-anglers, and of course with the boaters got control, just like the scene you just discussed. So you're on the back of the boat, and I'm sure oftentimes the boater's facing where he wants to cast, and you're stuck, whatever. Yeah. Maybe give some guys that don't have a lot of experience a couple of techniques that you think would help them at least put a few fish in the boat while they're learning, of course. I'm sure they're watching it, but just to kind of make them competitive.
Yeah. I think the number one thing to keep in mind is oftentimes the boater is not positioning the boat in order to screw you over.
Right, yeah.
They're doing it because they need to parallel the bank. They have to set up on the brush pile. Like going back to the BFL, my boater or my co-angler didn't catch fish. Just because with the wind and all that stuff, it was just tough for him to really line up on the stuff. And I told him, hey man, just throw up there. I don't care.
Right.
But he was so polite that when I had 4 fish at 3:00, he put his rods down and sat down because he didn't want to get the bite I needed.
That's pretty cool.
It's awesome. And so, anyways, I think first off, because if you get pissed off your boater's positioning the boat, however, your mental game shot, you're not going to fish well. Okay?
You're out of your comfort zone just to begin with.
You can't let what your boater do dictate how your day's going to go. Okay. Or what your boater does dictate how your day's going to go.
Listen, I got a daughter that's an English major. Trust me, that happens to me all the time. I'm like, did I say that right? So I totally get that.
So if your boater is, positioning the boat, however, to where you can get optimal cast, some things you can do to pick up fish, pay attention to their graphs. I have 2 graphs in my console. I turn one off to save battery, but I make sure I leave one on for my co-angler. Mm-hmm. I always turn off my back sonar when I'm fishing, so he doesn't get to see what's under the boat. Not for the purpose of him not to see what's under the boat, but just because I don't want the sound.
Right.
I don't need it, right? But I'll leave him a map. So if you're confident enough, if your boater's nice enough, you can say, hey, dude, you mind leaving the map on so I can see? Mm-hmm. Especially if you're fishing points or whatever. But pay attention to the graph, okay? That's number one, because if he does leave his sonar on, a lot of times you'll see fish down there you can drop on. I did that at Kentucky Lake. Mm-hmm. Jacob Wheeler was next to me. There was all kind of people, and everybody was casting up on top of the hump, and the fish had slid off. The dude left his Garmin on, and they were stacked. And so I just dropped my drop shot down there and had 17 pounds in about 40 minutes. And then everybody backed off and threw a drop shot. And, that's just, I would have never, if I hadn't paid attention to the graph, that would have never happened.
That makes sense.
So pay attention to the graph. Co-angler baits, if you're dropping on something, you need a drop shot. If you're going to pay attention to the graph, it's just, you need a drop shot, you need a Nico rig, something to drop on them with, something to drag. If I'm a co-angler, I typically am not throwing some crazy moving baits.
Keep it simple.
Unless it's topwater. I'll throw topwater. Even if your boater's cranking or something, 90% of the time they're going to snatch those fish anyway, so you're wasting your time. If he's parallel on a bank, cranking, just drag right off straight behind the boat. You pick up those deeper fish, he's not going to reach.
Okay, so what are we talking about when we're dragging?
Shaky head.
Shaky
That's
head.
my go. I mean, I've made more money on a shaky head. I'm sure a lot of people have made more money on a shaky head than anybody else. Pat Fisher, I don't know if you're familiar with him. He's a stick on a coney. I mean, he's like a largemouth guy.
Uh-huh.
Fished FLW tour for a while, made a bunch of money.
Right.
But he told me one time, you will not make more money on anything but a shaky head.
Really?
And it stuck with me. And he's right. I mean, I've caught more fish on a shaky head than anything else. So
Yeah.
if you were a co-angler and you had to bring one rod, 7-foot spinning medium, 10-pound braid, 8-pound fluoro, 10-pound fluoro, depending on whatever you're going to be around cover-wise, and just roll with it.
Okay.
You know?
What about these guys that, let's put a little twist on the scenario. Now we're talking two-man tournament teams, kind of very similar to what Josh and I do in our electric only. So we fish together constantly. You know, I would say 95% of the time, unless one of us has a reason why we can't. So we're together, and, you know, sometimes I'm in the front, he's in the boat. Let's just say, how can a guy in the back of the boat maximize the team effort as a co-angler, I guess, in that situation?
Yeah. So what I'm about to say goes for both the team situation and BFL Costa Open situation, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I want whoever's in the back of my boat throwing something different than me. Now, in a team situation, that's because oftentimes we're trying to figure out something additional to what we've already got figured out.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's a different color, you know, a different water column. You know, if I'm throwing top water, maybe he is dragging.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think one of the hardest things to figure out just in a day of fishing, if you've got one day, is are they suspended or are they on the bottom? You know?
Right.
So I want the guy in the back of my boat or my team partner throwing something different than me, even in a BFL situation or whatever, because now as a co-angler, you got to keep this in mind as well. I use my co-anglers to tell me information about what's going on. You need to pay attention to that if you're a co-angler. If your boater's catching them on a certain bait, say he's dragging, why are you still throwing a fluke? You know?
Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
Okay. So even if he's dragging a jig, throw that shaky head. If he's throwing a shaky head, maybe you pick up a jig, try to get that big bite, that big bass.
That kicker right there.
So the main thing is just I want the guy in my boat throwing something different.
Okay.
Or if I'm a co-angler, I want to differentiate myself from what my boater's doing.
That's good advice. So I am Mr. Joe, we'll just say Joe, and I'm looking down and I say, okay, BFLs are looking for non-boaters.
Mm-hmm.
What little advice can you give them to push them over the edge to take that first step, to take a shot doing it?
What do you got to lose?
That's true.
Here's how I look at it. And I told this to that co-angler that I had in the BFL.
Mm-hmm.
I said, hey, dude, you know, I felt bad you didn't catch fish, whatever. And, you know, he was real like I said, dude, he was like, dude, I'm done. Like, you do your thing. Like,
right.
I'm stoked for you. But I said, hey, bro, you know, if it makes you feel any better, I charge $425 for 8 hours with me in a boat. You paid $200 for a BFL. That's a half price guide trip.
That makes sense.
You know?
Yeah.
If you're a co-angler and looking to go into BFL, what have you got to lose? You're going to learn something, regardless of how your boater is. You know, you'll learn something about the lake. You'll learn how the guys caught them that day. What I love is getting in a tournament and getting beat bad, and then seeing, oh my God, that's how they caught them.
Right.
Okay. If you're at a BFL as a co-angler, you know, man, I threw a jig all day, didn't get a bite. Well, they caught them on top water or whatever.
And
okay.
you just make that mental note right there.
Yep,
Yeah.
for next time. So
okay.
I think as a co-angler, you just need to look at it as a learning experience. What's keeping you from fishing a BFL? You don't want to learn? Well, we can't help you there. You know?
Right.
So
that makes sense, and that's some good advice. I think some people are just kind of, the unknown scares them a little bit.
Yeah.
So.
And I mean,
and they're intimidated by being around pros. Some people just, you know, maybe that's an intimidation factor.
Especially at the BFL, you have no clue what you're going to pull. You can pull
Right.
Jason Johnson or you can pull Joe Blow. Like,
Right.
You really don't know. But, you know, it's just part of it.
It is what it is, right?
You do enough of them, you'll do fine. So.
Okay. All right, guys, that's some great advice on those things, like, you know, the etiquette and what to bring. If you're considering being a co-angler, just like Nathan says, give it a shot and get out there and just see what happens. What have you got to lose, right?
Yep.
That's it. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Fish North Georgia podcast. If y'all have any topics or guests you'd like to see in the future, leave it in the comments below. Hit that subscribe button, click that bell so that you'll be notified of any future videos. And don't forget to give us a follow on Facebook and Instagram at Fish North Georgia. And we look forward to seeing you soon.